Properties of multiplication. Multiplication can be indicated by putting a dot between two numbers or by putting the numbers into parentheses, like this. We won't generally use x to indicate multiplication, like this, since we're going to use this letter a lot in algebra as a variable. Therefore, multiplying 3 times 2 will look like this or this. Multiplication is repeated addition. So to find the product of 3 times 2, we would add the number 2 to itself 3 times. 3 times 2, I like to think of this as 3 groups of 2. So 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups of the number 2. 2 plus 2 plus 2, start at 0, move 2 to the right, 2 to the right, 2 to the right, and the answer is 6. Since addition is commutative and multiplication is just repeated addition, multiplication is commutative. 3 times 2 is 3 groups of 2. 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6. 2 times 3, you can say 2 groups of 3. 1 group, 2 groups of 3. 3 plus 3, start at 0, add 3 more, you still get 6. There's nothing special about the numbers we chose. So in general, a times b is equal to b times a. Adding a number a to itself b times yields the same result as adding a number b to itself a times. Since addition is associative and multiplication is repeated addition, multiplication is associative. So for instance, in parentheses, 3 times 2 times 5 equals 3 times, in parentheses, 2 times 5. Let's check if that's true. Well, 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. And over here, we have 3 times 2 times 5. So we'll do this first, right? PEMDAS, we do parentheses first. 2 times 5, 2 groups of 5 is 10. Times 3, 3 groups of 10 is 30. Yes, it's true. And we can also see this on the number line. All right, so here we have 3 groups of 2. So we add 2 to itself 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and we get 6. Then 6 times 5 is 6 groups of 5, or 5 added to itself 6 times, and we end up over here at 30. On the other hand, here we can do 2 groups of 5, or add 5 to itself twice. We end up at 10. 10 times 3, 3 groups of 10, or 10 added to itself 3 times. We still end up at 30. There's nothing special about the numbers we chose, so in general, this is true. Multiplying AB to itself C times yields the same result as multiplying BC to itself A times. Now, let's look at multiplying by 1. When multiplying 7 by 1, we're adding 7 to itself 1 time. Therefore, we will remain on the same number that we started with, which is 7. You can also think of this as 1 group of 7, or 7 groups of 1. 1 plus 1 plus 1, 7 times. Since there's nothing special about the numbers we multiplied by 1, this is true for any number. A times 1 equals A. The result of multiplying any number by 1 is the original number. Next, let's look at multiplying 7 by 0. When multiplying 7 by 0, we're not adding 7 to itself at all. 0 groups of 7, or 7 groups of 0. Therefore, our starting point will remain on 0. 7 times 0 equals 0. Once again, since there's nothing special about the number 7, this is true for any number. A times 0 equals 0. The result of multiplying any number by 0 is 0. Multiplication is distributive, so we can either add these two numbers together first, so 4 times 1 plus 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 4 times 3 is 12, or we can distribute the 4. 4 times 1 plus 4 times 2. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 plus 8 is 12. Both sides yield 12, so they are equivalent, and that can also be seen on the number line. There's nothing special about the numbers we chose, so in general, c times a plus b equals c times a plus c times b. Adding the sum of a and b to itself c times yields the same result as adding the product of c and a to the product of c and b. Since addition is closed for integers and multiplication is repeated addition, multiplication is closed for integers. Any two integers, when multiplied together, yield another integer. If a and b are integers, then a times b is going to equal a times b. That means a times b is an integer. Here's a summary of the properties of multiplication. We learned earlier about multiplying positive integers like these. 3 times 2 means to add 2 to itself 3 times, or add 3 to itself 2 times. What happens when we multiply a positive and negative integer? It works the same way when you multiply a negative number by a positive number. So 3 times negative 2 just indicates to add negative 2 to itself 3 times. So we start at 0, and we add negative 2, we add negative 2, and we add negative 2. And look at that, we end up at negative 6. Would negative 3 times 2 give us the same answer of negative 6? Explain your answer. Since multiplication is commutative, negative 3 times 2 is the same thing as 2 times negative 3. Negative 3 times 2 is adding negative 3 to itself 2 times, and you still end up with negative 6. So this just becomes adding negative 3 to itself twice. You start at 0, you add negative 3, and then you add negative 3 again. Look at that, negative 6. Therefore, multiplying a positive and negative integer results in a negative integer. A times negative b equals negative a times b, which equals negative ab. When multiplying two numbers, if both are positive, the answer will be positive. If one is negative and the other is positive, the answer is negative. But what about if both of the numbers are negative? How do we interpret negative 3 times negative 2? Well, since 3 times negative 2 means to add negative 2 to itself 3 times, we could interpret negative 3 times negative 2 to mean to subtract negative 2 from itself 3 times. We already learned that addition and subtraction are inverses, so subtracting negative 2 is the same as adding 2. Therefore, negative 3 times negative 2 indicates to add 2 to itself 3 times. So negative 3 times negative 2 equals 3 times 2, 6. When multiplying two numbers, if they have the same sign, the answer is positive. If they have different signs, the answer is negative.